I had always been drawn to the woods. Ever since I was a child, I've been fascinated by their deep, untamed nature. The way the trees seem to stretch endlessly into the sky, their tops lost in a tangled maze of branches. There was something calming about the rustling leaves, the smell of damp earth, and the way the sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden streams. I spent my summers wandering through those woods, my curiosity leading me deeper with each passing year. But this time was different. I had been camping with a few friends, an impromptu trip we decided to take when we found an old trail map tucked into the back of a secondhand store in town. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway, a chance to unwind from our busy lives. But what we didn't know, what we could never have known, was that this particular forest, this patch of wilderness hidden deep in the mountains, was not like the others. The first sign that something was wrong came early in the evening. We had set up camp near a small clearing, nestled at the foot of an ancient oak tree that seemed to have been there for centuries. It was peaceful, almost idyllic, as we sat around the fire, laughing, cooking marshmallows, and telling stories. But then, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world around us began to darken, I felt it, the first stirrings of discomfort. It started as a faint hum, so soft I almost dismissed it as a trick of the wind. But then it grew, slowly at first, like a distant static buzz creeping through the air, carried by the evening breeze. It wasn't quite the sound of crickets or wind through the trees, but something otherworldly. My friends didn't seem to notice, lost in their conversations, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The buzz wasn't normal. "Hey, do you guys hear that?" I asked, my voice betraying a hint of unease. "Hear what?" Mark, my closest friend, responded with a laugh, his mouth full of marshmallow. "It's just the woods, dude. Relax." But it wasn't just the woods. I could feel it deep in my bones, the unnatural hum crawling under my skin. The air around us seemed to thicken, almost as if it had taken on a weight I couldn't describe. I glanced at the others, but they were all too preoccupied to notice. So I let it go, at least for the time being. As night fully fell and the last traces of daylight disappeared, the buzz grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't a simple static hum anymore. It was as if the air itself was vibrating. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Every time the breeze shifted, it carried with it that unnerving sound, now tinged with something darker, something that didn't belong in the forest. I tried to ignore it, burying myself in conversation, but my unease only grew. The forest, usually alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, had gone eerily silent. There were no owls hooting, no rustling leaves from small animals. Just a constant creeping buzz. "Guys, seriously, do you hear that?" I pressed again, this time my voice more urgent. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Dude, are you okay?" "It's just the wind, man." I didn't answer him. Instead, I stood up and walked a few paces away from the fire. The static buzz was louder here, pulsing in my ears like a low, droning hum. It seemed to be coming from deeper within the woods, beyond the clearing where we had set up camp. My heart began to pound as I felt the hairs on my neck prickle. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to walk towards it. Something inside me, some primal instinct, told me that I needed to know where the sound was coming from. I took a hesitant step toward the tree line, then another and another, the buzzing getting louder with every step I took. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping sharply as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. "Where are you going?" Mark called out, his voice distant behind me. "Just checking it out," I replied, though I wasn't sure why. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something in the air, something in the woods that was waiting. It was a presence, not seen but felt, creeping under my skin, making my pulse race. I stepped further into the forest, the trees growing denser, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands, scratching at the darkening sky. The sound grew louder still, as if I were moving toward its source. It felt like the forest was alive, watching me, its every whisper amplified by the static buzz. The trees seemed to close in around me, the underbrush growing thick and tangled. I turned back toward the campfire, but the flickering light now seemed a distant memory, swallowed by the dark. That's when I saw it. Between the trees, there was a faint glow, barely noticeable at first, just a soft, pulsating light in the distance. It was like a candle, but it flickered with an unnatural rhythm, the same static was pulsing in sync with the glow. I couldn't tear my eyes away. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to turn and go back to the safety of the campfire, but my legs wouldn't obey. The light beckoned me, drawing me deeper into the woods. With each step, the air grew colder, the buzz growing louder and more disorienting, until I was almost deafened by it. The trees here were older, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their roots sprawling out in strange, unnatural shapes. I pushed through the thick underbrush, the sound of my breathing sharp in the silence, each exhale like a scream in the oppressive stillness. And then I reached it. At the center of a small clearing, there stood a stone pillar, ancient and weathered. On top of it sat a small, tarnished device, like an old radio receiver or some kind of archaic communication tool. Its metal surface was covered in moss, and yet it emitted that soft, buzzing static. A strange energy seemed to radiate from it, the air thick with the hum, like the pulse of the earth itself. I reached out to touch it. The moment my fingers brushed the surface, a jolt of electricity surged through me, as if the device were alive, its energy leaching into my body. The buzzing intensified, the static now unbearable, like 1,000 voices all speaking at once. And then, just when I thought I might collapse from the intensity of it, the world around me shifted. The trees seemed to warp, twisting and bending as if reality itself was fracturing. The ground beneath me trembled, and the buzzing became a roar, a deafening, mind-shattering sound that filled my entire being. The glow from the device flashed, blinding white, and for a moment I saw something in the distance, a figure standing just beyond the trees, watching me. I don't remember running. The next thing I knew, I was back at camp, gasping for breath, my body trembling with fear. My friends were still sitting around the fire, as if nothing had happened. But the buzzing, the hum, the static was still there, faint but persistent, now lingering in the air around us. It was as if the forest itself had come alive with it, filling every corner of the woods. "Are you okay?" Mark asked, his voice concerned. I couldn't speak. I couldn't explain what had happened, couldn't put into words the horrors I had just witnessed. All I could hear was the buzz, a constant hum in the back of my mind, pulling at my thoughts. It wasn't over. The forest wasn't done with me yet. But I knew one thing for certain. Something in the woods had awakened, and now it was watching me. The night stretched on, but sleep didn't come easy. I lay there, wide-eyed, staring into the flickering fire, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my head. My friends were still sitting around the fire, oblivious to the strange events I had just experienced. Their voices, so calm, so normal, seemed to pull me further from the reality I had just witnessed. Mark tossed another log on the fire, the flames crackling loudly. "You good, man? You look like you saw a ghost or something." I forced a laugh. "Nah, just a little tired, I guess." But the truth was I was far from tired. My mind was wide awake, my senses heightened, as if I were waiting for something, waiting for that hum, that buzz, to return. And sure enough, it did. At first, it was faint, just a soft static in the distance. But as the minutes passed, it grew louder, becoming the same constant, vibrating hum I had heard earlier. I sat up, my heart thumping against my ribs. The others didn't seem to hear it. They were still laughing, chatting about some nonsense that had no meaning in my world right now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was out there, just beyond the campfire's light, waiting. "Guys, seriously, do you hear that?" I said again, my voice more forceful this time. Mark looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "Dude, it's just the wind or something. It's late. You're probably just hearing things." But I knew what I heard, and it wasn't just the wind. The static buzz was getting louder, now twisting and distorting, like a broken radio station fighting for a signal. I glanced into the trees, beyond the campfire's reach, but there was nothing, just the shadows of the forest, the same trees I had walked past earlier. Yet I could feel it, the presence. "I think I'm going to take a walk," I said suddenly, standing up without waiting for the response. Mark shot me a confused look. "Are you sure? It's really late." "I'll be fine," I said, forcing a calm tone into my voice. "Just need some fresh air." I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was calling to me, pulling me back into its depths. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't rest until I understood what it was. The hum continued to buzz in my ears, like an itch I couldn't scratch. The air felt heavy now, thick with something unseen. The woods weren't peaceful anymore. They were oppressive, like a dark cloud hovering just above my head. The trees loomed over me as I ventured deeper, the buzz growing louder with every step. I ignored the shiver running down my spine, the voice in the back of my head urging me to turn back. I couldn't. I had to know what was causing it, what was out there just beyond the reach of the campfire's light. I found myself standing at the edge of the clearing again, the place where I had discovered the strange device earlier. The buzz was deafening now, a constant roar filling my ears. I didn't know if I was imagining it or if the sound was actually coming from the stone pillar in the center of the clearing, but it seemed like the source of the disturbance. The air was thick with energy, vibrating, buzzing, almost as if the earth itself was alive. As I stepped forward into the clearing, the hairs on my neck stood up, and my breath caught in my throat. Something was wrong with the air. It felt charged, almost electric, like the atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I couldn't explain why, but I was drawn to the stone pillar again, my eyes fixed on it, my feet moving almost on their own, as if the forest had taken control of my body. The pulsating light from the tarnished device on top of the pillar flashed brighter than before, its light flickering erratically, casting strange shadows on the surrounding trees. I reached out, my hand trembling as I neared the device. The hum was louder now, almost overwhelming, and the air around me seemed to crackle with electricity. The ground beneath my feet trembled lightly, like distant thunder rumbling far away. And then something happened. A whisper. It was so faint at first that I thought I might have imagined it. But then it came again, louder this time, almost a voice, but not quite. It was a chorus of whispers, too many to make out, overlapping and blending together like a cacophony of voices. Help! It was a single word, repeated over and over, distorted by the static buzz that filled the air. The whisper seemed to come from all around me, from the trees, from the ground beneath my feet, from the device itself. I froze, my hand just inches from the device. The whisper was now a scream, echoing through my mind, filling my head with 1,000 voices. Help us! The buzzing intensified, growing louder and louder until it was deafening. My vision blurred, and I staggered backward, clutching my head as if I could somehow block out the noise. The ground beneath me shifted, and for a moment I thought I might fall through it. The world seemed to warp, like the forest itself was bending around me, contorting in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Please, help us. The voices were clearer now, each word seeping into my consciousness like poison. I didn't know if I was dreaming, hallucinating, or if something truly horrifying was happening to me. But before I could make sense of anything, the light from the device flashed, blinding me. In that moment of pure white light, something inside me snapped. I ran. I ran back to camp, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The static buzz was still there, louder than ever, but now it felt like it was following me, echoing in the very air around me. My legs burned as I pushed myself harder, faster, desperate to escape the growing noise. I burst into the camp, gasping for air. My friends looked at me in shock, as if they hadn't expected me back so soon. Dude, what's wrong with you? Mark asked, standing up from where he had been sitting by the fire. You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't speak. I couldn't form a sentence. The whispers, the buzz, the light, it was all still there, swirling in my head. It was suffocating me. I'm fine. I managed to choke out, though I knew I wasn't. I wasn't fine, not by a long shot. I had seen something in those woods, something that wasn't just a figment of my imagination, something that had been waiting, dormant for who knows how long, something that I had disturbed, and now it was following me. The campfire crackled again, sending sparks into the night air, but I didn't feel its warmth anymore. I felt cold to my very core, as if the forest had seeped into my bones and left a chill that would never leave. My heart still pounded, the static hum buzzing in my ears as if it had taken root inside my head. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't escape it. Mark sat back down, eyes narrowed, still processing what had happened. You're seriously freaked out, man. What did you see out there? I want to tell him. I really did. But the words wouldn't come. How could I explain the hum, the whispers, the overwhelming feeling that something ancient and malevolent had stirred? That I wasn't just hearing things, wasn't just seeing shadows, but that something was watching us, waiting? I don't know. I finally managed. My voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking louder would shatter the fragile bubble of sanity I had left. It was like a warning, like the forest is trying to tell me something. I don't know what, though. Mark shook his head. It's just your mind playing tricks on you, man. You've been out here in the woods too long. We all have. We should have packed up and gone back yesterday. I shook my head, unable to agree with him. I had heard it, felt it, something that was older than the trees themselves. I knew deep down that whatever had happened to me wasn't just in my head. The air had changed out there in the clearing. The forest had a pulse, a rhythm I couldn't quite understand, but it was there, echoing in the wind and the hum of the static. But I said nothing more. Mark was right about one thing. I was deep in the woods, and the further we stayed, the more it felt like something was closing in. But I had no intention of leaving, not yet. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like I had to go back to the clearing. Something was calling me. The night dragged on, and I pretended to sleep, my thoughts spiraling into a labyrinth of fear and confusion. The static buzz didn't stop, even in the quiet moments, even as the fire flickered low. It was in my mind now, wrapped around my thoughts like a vice. Every breath I took seemed to amplify the hum, vibrating my body from the inside out. Then, just as I thought I might go mad, I heard it again. The whisper. This time it was different, more urgent, more desperate. Call me. I jolted upright, my eyes wide in the dark, staring into the woods. The buzz had stopped, but the whisper lingered, curling around my consciousness like smoke. I could hear it, feel it, pressing against the edges of my sanity. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to go back. Mark, I began, but Mark was already asleep, his head resting on his arms beside the fire. I glanced at the others, but none of them seemed disturbed, lost in their own slumber. No one else had heard the whispers. No one else had felt the pull of the static that seemed to pulse through the air. I stood up slowly, careful not to disturb anyone, and grabbed my flashlight. It wasn't much, but it was something. The beam flickered weakly in the dark, casting long, jagged shadows over the campsite. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and stepped away from the fire. My boots crunched on the dry leaves as I moved toward the edge of the forest, where the buzzing seemed to call from. I didn't turn back. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the static buzz slowly returned, building in intensity. The trees loomed over me, their branches twisting and creaking in the wind, as if they were aware of my presence. The whispers came again, distant and soft, but more insistent now. I pressed on, my pulse quickening, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The deeper I went, the more the air seemed to hum, as though the entire forest was alive with a terrible energy. The clearing was just ahead. My heart raced, and my hands trembled as I stepped into the small open space. The stone pillar stood as it had before, silent and still, but this time something felt different. The air was thick, almost suffocating, with an electric charge that seemed to swirl around the pillar. The static hum was overwhelming now, vibrating in my chest and in my skull. The device at the top of the pillar pulsed with a sickly, rhythmic glow, casting an eerie light that danced across the clearing. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to look away. The whispering was louder now, almost deafening. It was as if the voices were right next to me, as though the very ground beneath me was alive with their cries. Call me. The word was unmistakable this time. It was a plea, a call. I took a step forward, my legs unsteady beneath me, and as I did, the air seemed to shift. The static buzz, the hum, it was all coming from the device now. It was as though it was vibrating with energy, feeding off the forest itself. My vision blurred, and I reached out instinctively, my fingers brushing the cold stone of the pillar. The moment my hand made contact, the ground beneath me trembled. The hum stopped. Everything fell silent. I pulled my hand back, heart racing in my chest, and took a step away from the pillar. But the silence didn't last long. No sooner had I moved than the forest seemed to come alive with sound again, the trees creaking and groaning as though they were shifting, bending around me. The whispers returned, louder than ever, but now they were no longer just words. They were screams. "Help us! You must help us!" The voices blended together into a maddening chorus, each cry more desperate than the last. And then the ground beneath my feet gave way. I fell. The earth opened up like a wound, swallowing me whole. I couldn't scream, couldn't even move. I tumbled, my body spinning through the air as the world around me turned upside down. My flashlight flew from my hand and disappeared into the dark, leaving me in a suffocating blackness. When I finally landed, the impact jarred my body. I lay there for a moment, disoriented and aching, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The silence was absolute, so still that I could hear my own breath echoing in the dark. I slowly pushed myself up, trying to stand, but the ground beneath me felt soft and wrong, like I was sinking into something that didn't belong. My heart raced, and panic rose in my chest as I looked around, my eyes straining to make out anything in the pitch-black darkness. And then, slowly, like the final breath of a dying thing, the static buzz began again. The sound was deafening now. It was everywhere, filling every corner of my mind, drowning out everything else. But beneath the hum, I heard it. A voice that wasn't human. And this time, it wasn't a whisper. "Welcome to the forest. Forever." I couldn't breathe. The words lingered in my mind like a poison, spreading through my veins, curling around my heart. "Welcome to the forest. Forever." The voice was no longer distant, no longer a mere whisper lost in the hum of static. It was here, in the darkness surrounding me, alive with malice and intent. I could feel its weight pressing down on me, like the very air was thick with the anger of whatever ancient force had taken residence in this forsaken place. My feet slipped in the soft earth beneath me, and I had to steady myself, hands clawing at the damp ground as the static buzz grew louder. It vibrated in my chest now, sending tremors through my body as though the ground itself was reverberating with the sound. The air was stifling, a mix of moisture and an odd, foul scent I couldn't place, like something decaying in the distance. I forced myself to stand, to look around, though I had no idea what I was hoping to find. The darkness pressed in on all sides, impenetrable, like a shroud that had been pulled over the world itself. There was no light here, not even the stars above. Everything felt swallowed up, consumed by the forest's hunger. The static buzz continued to buzz in my skull, relentless. I felt my mind fraying at the edges, the pressure building, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. Something was watching me. It was everywhere. I stumbled forward, pushing through the suffocating darkness, only to stop dead in my tracks. There was something ahead of me, a shape darker than the blackness around it. At first, I thought it was a trick of my eyes, the way shadows shift and stretch in the absence of light. But then it moved. It was slow at first, a shift in the dark that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the hum. My heart skipped a beat, my breath caught in my throat. It was tall, too tall. My mind raced to make sense of it, but the more I stared at the shape, the more I realized it wasn't human. It was elongated, like some grotesque reflection of a person, its edges blurred, as if the creature was made of the very darkness itself. My hand instinctively reached for the flashlight that had fallen somewhere in the abyss, but the beam wouldn't work. The light flickered and sputtered, casting weak, jittery flashes across the dark, only illuminating the grotesque shape for a fraction of a second before it vanished again into the void. I took a step back, but the movement was enough to make the thing turn, a motion so unnatural it made my skin crawl. It twisted, its form elongating even further, like something that wasn't meant to exist in the natural world. The hum intensified, as though the creature was feeding off the noise itself, using it as a conduit to communicate. I couldn't look away. My body froze as I watched the thing draw closer, its long limbs stretching out, twisting, reaching. It made no sound, only the ever-present hum that echoed in my skull. "Help us!" The voice came again, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was closer, its words cutting through the air like a blade, raw and tortured. I felt my legs give way beneath me, the weight of fear pulling me down. My thoughts were scrambled, my heart a thunderous drumbeat in my chest. I wanted to run, to escape, but every direction I looked was consumed by the oppressive blackness. The static, the hum, the terrible creature that slithered in the shadows. There was no escape. And then something else changed. The hum stopped. The world fell silent, too silent. My own breath was all I could hear now, ragged and uneven, as I struggled to make sense of what was happening. It was as if the forest had paused, holding its breath. Even the trees, those ancient guardians of the woods, seemed to be watching. I knew something was coming. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Something ancient, something malevolent, something that had been waiting for a long time. The ground trembled beneath me again. The vibrations were faint at first, but they grew stronger, sending ripples through the dirt and the roots of the trees. I reached down, instinctively trying to steady myself, but the ground buckled beneath me. And that's when I heard it. A loud crack. I snapped my head up, just in time to see the forest around me shift, as though the trees themselves were bending toward me, twisting and groaning in the windless air. The static buzz grew louder again, shaking me to my core, and the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. "It's too late." The words burned through my mind, and then the ground gave way entirely. The earth beneath me split open, and before I could react, I was falling. The fall seemed endless, like I was being drawn into the very bowels of the earth. I could feel the air rushing past me, whipping at my skin, but there was no impact, no sense of falling at all, just an overwhelming sense of emptiness. And then, suddenly, everything stopped. I hit the ground with a force that jolted my entire body. My ribs screamed in protest, my vision blurring for a moment as I lay there, gasping for air. The static buzz was gone, replaced by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I opened my eyes, squinting against the dark. This place, whatever it was unlike anything I had ever seen. The air was thick with moisture, and the walls around me were jagged, like the insides of some long-forgotten cave. There were no stars, no trees, only the oppressive dark, closing in from all sides. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, my limbs unresponsive, as if the very air was weighing me down. My fingers scraped against the cold stone floor as I pushed myself up. The silence here was deafening, except for the faint echoes of something far off. It was a voice that wasn't my own, and it was whispering, "Come closer." I couldn't move. I tried to lift my hands, to crawl, to scream, but the silence around me was so thick it suffocated any thought. The echoing voice, that faint whisper, continued to float through the air like a low, humming melody that had no beginning and no end. Come closer. There was a pulse in the air, a rhythm that beat in time with my own panicked heart. Each breath was shallow, and my chest felt like it was closing in, as though the very atmosphere around me had become a trap. I could feel the weight of the silence pushing down on me, crushing my thoughts, but the voice kept calling, luring me deeper. I squeezed my eyes shut. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. It was just the madness of being lost in the forest, a result of fear and isolation playing tricks on my mind. But when I opened them again, the landscape had changed. The jagged walls around me now seemed to pulse with a dim light, an eerie glow that crept across the stones, and something moved in the shadows just beyond my sight. The voice, once a faint murmur, now grew clearer. The whispering had turned into words, slow and deliberate, drawing nearer with each heartbeat. Come closer, it repeated, and this time it felt more like a command than a plea. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The pull was undeniable. Every part of me screamed to run, to escape, but my legs wouldn't obey. My body refused to fight. The dark, cavernous space stretched before me, cold and silent, but there was something in the distance. The faintest flicker of movement, something that seemed alive. With every step I took, the static buzz, the one that had been with me since the beginning, grew louder, vibrating in my chest, rattling my skull, driving me toward the source of the sound. My feet shuffled over the uneven ground, guided only by the faint pulse of that unnerving light. And then I saw it. A figure stood in the center of the cavern, its shape barely discernible in the gloom, but unmistakable. It was tall, just as I'd seen before, but now it was more distinct, its form shuddering in the dim glow. Its limbs were unnaturally long, twisted and angular, wrapped in shadows that seemed to stretch toward me, trying to reach for me. But it wasn't just a figure. It was something older, something that had been buried in the earth for centuries, waiting for someone like me. It was the forest. It was the static buzz, the oppressive silence, the whispers. It was everything. My heart pounded violently in my chest as I tried to move backward, but the ground beneath me had become slick with something wet, like moss, sticky and cold. My feet slid out from under me, and I found myself sprawling forward, unable to catch myself. That's when I heard the voice again, this time not from the shadows, but right beside me. "Welcome." I froze. The air was thick with dread, and I could feel the cold, wet breath of the creature on my neck. Every inch of my body screamed to run, to escape, but the weight of the darkness held me in place, immobilized by fear and a power I couldn't comprehend. The figure loomed closer, its shape sharpening in the glow. And as it did, I saw something terrible. Its face, or what could be called a face, was nothing but a mass of writhing, twisted shapes, like a collage of images too distorted to recognize. Eyes, mouths, hands, all wrong, all bleeding together in a grotesque amalgamation of things that should never be. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't a being. It was the forest. It was the forest itself, twisted and corrupted by time and dark forces beyond human understanding. It was alive, and now it wanted me. I gasped for air, my chest tightening as the creature, the forest, loomed over me. I could feel its presence suffocating me, its limbs curling around my body, tightening like vines, cold and unyielding. The static buzz, the hum that had been constant, grew louder, deafening now. It felt like it was inside my skull, crawling beneath my skin, threading through my veins. The thing in front of me leaned down, and I felt the brush of its breath, if it could be called that, tickling the hair on the back of my neck. "You'll never leave," it whispered, a sound like 1,000 voices murmuring in unison. "The forest claims all, and now it claims you." The words echoed in my mind as they began to blur with the static hum that filled my senses. I could no longer see clearly. My vision fractured, my thoughts shattered, as the cold, living darkness of the forest pressed in, swallowing me whole. There was no escape, and then just as quickly as it had started, everything went quiet. The buzz, the voice, the oppressive feeling of the forest, all of it vanished. I opened my eyes. I was no longer in the cavern. The world I found myself in was eerily familiar, but not in a comforting way. It was the same forest, but different. It was quiet, too quiet. No buzzing, no whispers, no static hum in the air. But the trees, they were watching. They were always watching. I looked down and my heart stopped. In my hand, the phone. The same one I had dropped when the forest swallowed me whole. The faint glow of the screen flickered weakly, just like it had before. But there were no new messages. No missed calls. Only one thing. Help us. I didn't know if it was too late. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never leave.